Good morning, YouTube. Well, I'm actually in the middle of another job, the AC compressor swap, but I'm waiting on some parts, so I can't just sit on my hands most days. So I'm going to take on another project I've been putting off for a little while anyway. One of the primary things I was going to change when I decided to get a C3 and either restore it or rest a mod or whatnot was I'm not sure if you've gone through any of the who is Viking Motorworks or any of that stuff, but I'm an ex-dealer master tech. I was factory certified master under all the GM badges and a bunch of Japanese badges, and no, not much experience in European, but when it comes to General Motors, especially, I've got a ton of experience, and I worked in Chevy dealerships for most of my career, or GM dealerships. Chevy, Cadillac, GMC, Pontiac, Buick, Oldsmobile, Geo. I had to get trained and certified on Isuzu when we took on the Geo line, Geo Prisms and Metros and all that stuff, and those various agreements with other manufacturers. But at any rate, I've seen a ton of these C3s in dealerships over the years. I was at a couple dealerships through the 1990s, 2000s, and worked on lots of C3s. And one of the constant problems with these cars was the power steering setup. And they originally used an auxiliary ram setup like this, and I'll put in a picture here. And what it does is you basically have a manual steering box, and the pitman arm from that steering box activates a valve on the end of the center link, and that redirects power steering fluid to this boost ram that helps move the center link and steer the front wheels, giving us the power assist we needed. The problem is that you had another whole set of lines. You had a cylinder hanging down on the almost on the ground, picking up all kinds of dust and dirt. The cylinder seals would blow out. The lines would leak. The valve on the center line would leak. Center link would leak. It was just a mess of a system. When it worked, yeah, it worked, but it didn't work for long. Never did. They're constant problems. I can't tell you how many cylinders I've replaced and lines I've replaced and the valves I replaced, and you have to adjust the valves. If they're not adjusted correctly, the wheels will swing one way or the other by themselves, and it's just a half-ass system. All because they didn't want to try to put a power steering box down on the frame. It was just cheaper and easier for GM to keep the manual box down there, basically a manual box. Some difference in maybe steering ratio, but so one of the first things I wanted to do was get rid of that system because it's just nothing but headaches. It never worked really good to start with. I wanted a little bit of a tighter turning ratio for performance sake and better road feedback. And so what I did was a Borgeson power steering box conversion. And they make a small style box that fits in the stock mounts. It bolts up to the bottom of the column. You have to collapse the column a little bit to make room for the box because it's a little longer in terms of reaching up towards the column. So you have to collapse the telescopic column a bit to fit it in there. But other than that, it's pretty much a bolt-in. Excuse me. And it works really, really well. It's a nice tight ratio. They don't fail. They don't leak. It's, unproblematic. The trade-off, well, I don't say a trade-off, but, one of the issues you can run into in these cars, I got a 43-year-old chassis with relatively thin frame. It's a full box frame, but it's only like 1/8 or 3/16 steel, not terribly stiff. And when you add this extra, when you increase the steering ratio and you increase the leverage against the center link, so the frames can flex at the box. The box will move and bring the inner wall of the frame rail with it. And, it softens up feel a little bit, but the bigger problem is that when you flex steel too many times, what happens? It cracks and you end up with frame crack. So this frame is nice and tight. It never had this conversion done until I got it. And I inspected it thoroughly when I pulled the old box off and when I cleaned the frame up and painted it. So, in that regards, it's good, but I don't want to get to a situation where the frame starts to crack because then I've got to pull everything apart, weld it, clean it, repaint it, all that stuff. It's a much bigger hassle. Other than the obvious safety hazard that if it suddenly lets go or if it cracks and I don't know it and suddenly the box comes loose off the frame, we've got a big problem. So one of the easiest improvements you can make to these cars when you do the Borgeson kit is put a steering box brace on. And there's a company named Ridetech makes a real nice brace. It's heavy gauge steel, powder coated. And basically it triangulates the steering box. It goes on the outer frame rail and reaches up and then comes across the top of the steering box and connects to the top of the box. So essentially the box is supported by both sides of the frame rail instead of just the inner side. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. If I can keep my fat finger out of the lens, got to switch to lefty. So there's the steering box. And as you can see, the nut right there, there's 3 bolts that come through the frame. 1 nut down there, 2 down that side. And those bolts are the only thing that hold us to the frame rail. So the brace is going to come up between the frame rail and the fender liner and reach up on top of the power steering box and bolt to 2 of those 4 bolts you see on top of the power steering box. And it slips underneath the bolt heads, which are right there. There's one hidden behind the fender liner there. And essentially triangulates the power steering box, stiffening it way up, and lets the whole frame take the load of the power steering box, which is constantly going to be it's constantly going to be torquing against the frame. Every time you cut the wheel back or forth, it applies leverage to that frame rail. And I'm just rambling right now. So here it is, brandy new. Here's the part number. This is fresh from, I think I got it from Summit. Good set of instructions. We'll just throw these away right now. No, I'm kidding. Nice new bag of hardware. Let me get my spectacles on here. And those are grade 8s. Good stuff. Looks like some nylocks. Yeah, grade 8s and nylocks. One of my favorite combinations. Nice. Now you can see what this guy's going to do. It's going to come up off the frame rail and reach across and triangulate the top of the box in. And we've got some stiffening welded up the inside, good heavy gauge steel, nice powder coated finish. Can't recommend these enough. And a little bit of a slot to it to give you some some leeway to get the box lined up with the holes in the frame, because there are always some slight variations. So we're going to get started doing this guy. Something I'm going to do right from the start is loosen up that return line fitting. And ultimately, it'll be a lot easier to loosen up and remove these 2 bolts with the box still bolted on, because I don't know what the torque is on these from the factory, and they've been in there a while. So I'm going to get these bolts off, but I need to get this return line out of the way. Isn't enough flex. I don't want to. Well, actually, no. I can push that down. If I push it under the pressure line, that's fine. So I'll get those. So I'm going to break those guys loose, get them out of the way, and then take the 3 bolts out, and I should be able to lean the box over towards the motor. And getting the box out of the way will give me enough clearance to slip that bracket in and out and get it underneath the hoses and get all that lined up. So let me grab a couple of tools, and we'll get started here. All right, let's see what we got here. I'll tell you what, these are supposed to be 37 foot-pounds. That's a whole lot more than 37. Now let's see. Should be 9/16, and they are. And these aren't. These should only be about 30 foot-pounds also. They shouldn't be real tight. I'm going to go from the outside. Might just hang the open end on it and see if I can bring my impact around underneath and spin the bolt right out of the nut. Let's see here. Let's see here. on it? Can you? Can you? Alright, so I guess when I put these on, I really didn't want them coming off, huh?
5 hours later.
So, let's see if you can see what's going on here. I bumped the fucking thing. All right, so brace is in there. I'm going to start these bolts up on top. As you can see, one of them's a round hole, the other one's elongated. Again, just to account for tolerances, you know, manufacturing and box spec and all that. That line going to cooperate and get that sucker out of there. You know, with the brace in between, it's keeping that line from dropping down where it was. If I can get the thread past it, I don't want the flange on the bolt to grab the line and damage it. All right, so I got these all snugged down. Ridetech lists these as 30 foot-pounds. It's tough at this angle, and really, my arm's almost straight. I feel like a little girly, man. You just can't get an angle on it. Let me try to put the phone down, see if I get some more leverage. Alright, that's one. It's a reminder for myself to get a better 3/8 torque wrench, because this one's a piece of shit, man. The Pittsburgh. And at low torque settings and in certain angles, you could barely hear that sucker click. Ooh, I'm going to need a pinky here to hold this wrench. As I get the bolt to stop turning with the nut. That's why I hung this open end on it, so I can keep an eye on it, see if the bolt's turning or not. A little bit. Let me hook you underneath. There we go. I'm going to need two-handed again. Hang on. Stand by. All right, so after much cursing and sweating, I got those 3 torqued on the frame. Now these guys go to 37. See, click. I feel it clicking. I don't hear it, which is a problem with this cheap shit torque wrench. Can I balance you up there? Can I can. goes. All right, so I switched out to a better torque wrench. Because that Pittsburgh 3/8 wrench, I'm telling you, is going in the trash right now. I'm so tired of dealing with that piece of crap. I just don't. Goes. I don't have much use for 3/8 torque wrenches generally, so I just had a a cheapy one, which is funny as I clean up all my other Snap-on stuff. But I mean, that's the philosophy I adopted a long time ago, was that stuff that I use every day that gets used hard, that I need to really count on, mostly 3/8 ratchet stuff, 3/8 drive stuff, is going to be, I'm going to spend the money on Snap-on stuff because it's just generally better. Lasts longer. It's built better. The open ends don't flex and round off bolt heads. A lot of it depending on the handles, like the ratchet handles and stuff. The comfort grid handles are more comfortable to use. It's worth the extra couple of bucks. Like this big 3/8, this big 1/2-inch breaker ratchet. It's like 18-inch handle. It's a Snap-on. I've had this thing for 25 years. I've never had to rebuild it. Never had to rebuild the head in it. 1/2-inch torque wrench, I don't use all the time, but I use it. It's an Icon. Harbor Freight's come a long way. The Icon line is really nice. I've got some Icon stuff. Now, as you can see, most of the 3/8 stuff is almost all Snap-on flank drive plus, except for the oddball I've lost, like 10 millimeter. And then I started to retrofit most of my 1/4-inch over to Snap-on as well. Started out with cheapo stuff because there isn't much torque on 1/4-inch drive fasteners, so having the best socket isn't really relevant. Same goes the other way with 1/2-inch drive. I mean, generally this stuff is so big and burly that even cheapo stuff will work well. Some of the ones I use constantly, 9/16, that I've got in a Snap-on because I broke the cheapo set, whatever it was to start with. These are Snap-ons, 6-point, instead of the 12-point crap I started out with. This set is probably, God, it's got to be 40 years old. This 12-point, I think it's KMC. Matter of fact, the 1/2-inch that I just used to break those bolts loose was a 1/2-inch KMC. You know what KMC stands for? Kmart Corporation. How's that? When I was first starting out in 1980 something, you had to get the right sizes to work with, and then you just upgrade as you go. And the hex drivers, these are all Snap-on because those take a lot of torque, and it's real easy to round these bits off. If they're not good, if they're junky steel, they round off, they break. You're breaking fasteners, you're just tripling the amount of time you put into a job. Same thing, some of the metrics, these are Snap-ons. 13, 15, 17. Actually, looks like this was a max set, and as they broke, I replaced some of the broken ones with Snap-ons, 13 and 15. Probably the two you use the most. 10. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have a 10 and a 1/2-inch drive, but when are you ever going to put, 1/2-inch drive style torque into a 10 millimeter fastener? So yeah, you don't have to buy name brand everything, but the stuff you count on day in and day out, all day, every day, save you a trip to the store to get your lifetime warranty, and save you a trip to the tool truck, and it just makes up, you're better in the long run spending good money on decent stuff to start with that you're going to use all the time. Like these extended ball end Allens. These are Husky. That's Home Depot brand. How often do I use them? Once in a blue moon. My little 1/4-inch drive ratchet, Craftsman. Never put any torque through it. Keep it clean, service it, it'll last forever. But 1/4-inch drive, 3/8 drive, 1/2-inch drive stuff, extensions, those are all Snap-on. Yeah. Impacts are junk. You know why? Because impacts are built like cavemen, man. They're made out of stone. They're ginormous. They could take a ton of torque. These are probably ATD, or let's see, that's a Craftsman. ATD. So it's like tool store, auto parts store brand, ATD, Blackhawk, that kind of stuff, mid-grade. Well, let me clean all my stuff up. We're pretty much done here. Get rid of the old hardware. Box brace is in, doing its job. Lines are clear, nothing's rubbing. I'm just going to throw that one on the ground, that's fine. I'll go grab a magnet and pick it up because I'm too old to be climbing around more than I have to. Get rid of my tripod. Park that sucker over there. Thanks for tuning in. Like and subscribe if you like the content. I got more coming. And I appreciate you. Take care. Have a great day. Bye.
Do it. Do it. Do it.